The last night in Helena carried no wind, only the thin patter of rain falling on the metal roof of the makeshift cabin. Isola Gray sat at a shaky wooden table, a dim oil lamp near the edge, its unsteady light making the coins before her look as if they trembled. She leaned in again, her hands slender but worn from the life of a 29-year-old widow, counting each piece, each cold touch pressing deeper into her chest. $2.70, $1 to cover the rest of her room fee, maybe 30 cents for cornmeal, a little dried beans for one last meal, and 80 cents for the stage leaving Helena before sunrise. She went over it 100 times, but no matter how her hands shook, the final sum stayed the same. Not enough. A strained breath slipped out. Isola pressed her palms to her face, holding back the sound rising in her throat. She had done this all her life, holding in fear, grief, and the exhaustion no one here ever bothered to notice. No husband, no child, no family. Only herself and a letter from Red Haven saying her foster mother was dying. Come if you can. If you can. The words cut dull but deep. Isola pushed the room money aside. She chose the road, chose to see her mother one last time, chose to leave the place where she had lived like a shadow for 4 years since her husband died in the mine. She stood, slipped the remaining coins into her coat pocket, then set the half bag of cornmeal on the shelf and left a small note. For the next renter. I won't be back. The handwriting leaned, uneven, her hands shaking too much to steady it. When she opened the door, the rain hit her face like cold fingers. Helena at night offered nothing but wet earth, the faint rattle of a stage wagon in the distance, and scattered lamps holding on to the tired streets. Isola pulled her worn coat tight and stepped through puddles, walking half a mile to the station. By the time she arrived, dawn had begun to thin the dark. A pale line rose over the eastern ridge, touching her sleep-red eyes. A few travelers waited, a heavy-set merchant muttering to himself, a farming couple holding seed bags, and a man leaning against a post, his hat brim shadowing half his face. When the stage arrived, the horses struck the wet ground with a heavy rhythm. The driver swung the door open, and people boarded one by one. Isola moved slowly, cloth bag in hand, her legs aching from the long walk. On the second step, her skirt snagged on the frame. She tugged lightly, but it held. A short breath escaped her, not from fear of torn cloth, but from the familiar sense of being caught in place as she had been for years. A hand appeared. Steady, broad, unexpectedly clean. It lifted her bag before she could react. She looked up. The man beneath the hat tilted his head, gray eyes calm as a morning lake. Not cold, not prying, just steady enough to make her pause. Wyatt Cole. Though she didn't yet know his name, she felt the quiet measure in every movement. Thank you, she said, her voice rough from the sleepless night. He only nodded, set the bag inside, then stepped back so she could pass. As she moved by, their shoulders brushed, so slight anyone else would forget it. But to Isola, it sent her pulse off balance. She took a seat across from him. The smell of damp wood, earth, and her own wet coat filled the cramped space. Wyatt Cole sat still as stone in the wind, but his gray eyes flicked toward her now and then, enough to show he recognized the guarded look of someone too used to loss. The wheels began to roll. The horses struck their rhythm. Isola rested a hand on her pocket, feeling the last of her coins. The journey had begun, and she did not know. In the exact moment their shoulders brushed again, when the stage jolted over a rut. that her life was about to turn in a direction she had never dared imagine. The stagecoach cabin was narrow, its old wooden walls creaking with every jolt of the wheels. The smell of leather from the seats, damp earth, and road dust clinging to coats mixed into the familiar scent of long travel. The heavy-set merchant pressed against the left window, complaining non-stop about the road. The farming couple curled into each other for warmth, as if they had long accepted that no journey out here was ever gentle. Isola sat straighter than she needed to, her hand resting lightly on her cloth bag, eyes fixed on the window, though she saw nothing. Mud streaked the glass, metal tapped against the undercarriage, and each sudden tilt forced her to grip the edge of the bench, but she tried to appear steady, as if hardship could no longer reach her. A habit built from too many years of bracing herself. Wyatt Cole sat across from her, his posture relaxed in a way that suggested he had known this kind of shaking since boyhood. He said little, but his silence was not a hard one, more like the silence of someone who observed everything others failed to notice. When the wheels hit a rough patch, the coach tipped sharply to the right. Everyone lurched. Isola's hand, unused to rest and worn from the sleepless night, trembled. She tried to grip the seat, but her fingers slipped off the wood. Another hand reached out, steady, warm, intentional. Wyatt caught her wrist, light enough not to startle her, firm enough to keep her balanced. "You all right?" he asked quietly. His voice was low and even, without push. The question should have been simple, yet it struck somewhere deep in her chest. She pulled her hand back at once, eyes shifting away, trying to hide the heat rising to her throat. "I'm fine," she said, though both of them knew she wasn't. The warmth from his hand lingered on her skin. Wyatt didn't press, only nodded in a way that respected her withdrawal, then turned his gaze back to the window. But Isola knew he kept track of her, not out of curiosity, but because he saw the strain she carried and tried to mask. She shut her eyes, forcing her breath to steady, but the sudden tilt had dragged up memories she worked hard to bury. Men running from the mine, their faces streaked with mud and stone dust. Someone shouting her husband's name, Lyle Gray. The way they carried him out on a wooden plank, breaths breaking, dark blood spreading across his shirt. Death coming fast, in a rain-soaked afternoon, much like last night. Isola opened her eyes to push the ghosts back. She could not let them take her now. Not when she had to reach Red Haven. Not when her foster mother breathed on borrowed time. Wyatt spoke just then, as if sensing the knot tightening in her chest. "I used to run messages along the line between Helena and Red Haven," he said, voice steady. "Roads like this, you get used to them." Isola looked at him. "You traveled a lot?" "Enough to know where the mud pulls you in and where to stay clear when it rains. And," he paused a moment, "enough to know Red Haven isn't easy if you don't know your way." The last words left something unusual in her, as though he knew more than a stranger should. But he spoke with a calm that had no edge, no reading of her life. Just a man who understood the frontier and the towns people reached, but seldom settled in. Isola pulled her shawl tighter. "I'll manage," she murmured, mostly to convince herself. Thunder rolled in the distance, and wind pushed hard through the seams of the coach. Wyatt tilted his head toward the sky darkening outside. "Rain," he said, plain as a fact. "And rain in this stretch tends to bring trouble." The coach jerked hard to the left, a deep jolt. The wheels slid into something soft and heavy. The merchant shouted. The farming couple clung to each other. The coach lurched to a stop. The horses cried out against the wind. Mud splashed high against the frame. Wyatt let out a slow breath. "We're stuck." Every muscle in Isola tightened. Rain began to strike the roof, first scattered, then pouring as if the sky had tipped. The journey had only begun, yet the first trial had already stepped into their path. The stagecoach wheels churned in the thick black mud, each sinking sound like something swallowing the whole wagon. The driver shouted a short, rough command, pulling hard on the reins, but the horses only stomped helplessly. The mud was so dense that every tug drove the coach deeper. "Out!" he yelled. "If we don't push, we're sleeping out here." The merchant groaned as if disaster had struck, and the farming couple jumped down at once, their boots swallowed to the ankles in a second. Isola hesitated, but Wyatt opened the door before she moved, ducking under the low roof, then turned back with his hand extended. "Careful," he said, voice steady in the wind. Isola hated leaning on anyone, hated revealing even a trace of weakness, but the ground was too soft, and her skirt was far from practical. She placed her palm in his. The touch was brief, yet the steadiness in his grip was almost strange, like he always knew exactly where to stand so others wouldn't fall. The moment her foot met the ground, mud caught the hem of her dress, dragging it heavy as iron. She tried to steady herself, but after one step, her foot slipped. A sharp breath escaped her as her body pitched to the side. Wyatt caught her instantly, so fast she couldn't track how he moved. His arm came around her back, holding her upright before she crashed into the wheel. They stood close enough that his breath touched her ear. "Easy," he murmured, calm and without pressure. Isola tried to regain herself, but her heart hammered, from the slip, and from something she refused to name. When she straightened, Wyatt released her at once, giving her space, giving her dignity, as though he understood a woman like her did not want to be seen as someone needing rescue again and again. "Thank you," she said, her voice thin as wind through a crack. Wyatt only nodded. The driver called out, "Take your places on both sides. Push when I holler." The farming couple moved into position. The merchant lingered behind them, trying to keep his shoes from vanishing into the muck. Isola found a grip along the coach's side, but the mud kept sinking her down, inch by inch, tilting her balance. Wyatt stepped beside her, slightly behind, exactly where he could catch her if she slipped. His voice came near her ear, low and warm. "Push with me. Don't strain your arms. Use your legs." His breath brushed her neck, and a shiver rose along her spine. She drew in a breath, nodded, and tightened her hold on the frame. 3, 2, 1. They pushed. Isola leaned forward, mud splashing cold across her skirt, heavy and soaking. Wyatt braced in perfect rhythm, his strength steady, never overwhelming, but enough to keep her from tipping. "Again!" the driver shouted. The second push was stronger. The horses lunged, dragging the coach forward. The wheels shrieked in the mud, then burst free with a thick, heavy pop. Everyone stumbled with the sudden release. Isola chouant, nearly slipped again, but Wyatt's hand steadied her elbow, silent and sure. "All right?" he asked. His voice had become familiar enough that she almost leaned toward it. "I'm fine," she said, though her uneven breath betrayed her. They climbed back inside, mud dripping from her hem onto the wooden floor. Isola sat down, shoulders weighted like stone, rain sliding from her hair down her collar and spine. She tried to sit upright, but her shoulders trembled with cold and exhaustion. Wyatt watched a moment, then offered her a clean, folded cloth. Take it, he said. Isola shook her head. I don't. It's only a cloth, he replied, tone so calm she couldn't refuse again. She reached for it, eyes lowered but their fingers brushed. Warmth ran along her hand like a spark to a place long untouched. She wiped her face, the mud on her neck, then rested the cloth on her lap. Rain pounded the roof now, hard and unrelenting. Isola looked out through the fogged window. Dark bands of storm clouds gathered over the mountains, thick as ink. The air in the coach shifted, heavier, tighter. Wyatt looked out as well. Storm's coming, he said softly. A shiver ran through her. Not from cold, but from a quiet sense that what waited ahead would test more than their strength against the weather. It would test her heart. Night fell so fast, no one inside the coach noticed it coming. A white flash tore across the sky, cutting through the small window like a cold blade. A second later, thunder hit the earth as if the whole ridge had roared. The entire coach shook, the horses shrieked hoarsely, and the driver shouted something the wind swallowed. Isola gripped the seat until her knuckles turned white. She forced herself upright, but the cold rising from the floor crawled up her legs, dragging with it a memory buried so deep she believed it gone. Wind cutting through the cracks of the barn door, straw spinning in small circles, lightning slipping through the broken roof and lighting the small legs of a child left alone. She had been 8 then, her foster mother gone to the next town for supplies, promising to return before the storm. But the storm came early. Wind ripped open the latch, caved part of the roof, and the little girl was trapped inside, thunder breaking so close she thought the ground had split. A thunderclap crashed over them now. Isola gasped. Not an exhale, but a breath caught wrong. Her chest tightened, short, uneven pulls, her body refusing to listen. Wyatt noticed instantly. He saw everything. The locked shoulders, the trembling hand, the wide eyes that focused on nothing. He spoke low, just for her. Switch seats with me. She shook her head, but the coach tilted again, hard enough to throw everyone sideways. The couple clung to each other. The merchant jolted back. And Isola, she lost her sense of direction completely. Wyatt didn't wait. He stood, bracing himself on the seat, then sat beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her. He simply placed himself close enough to shield half her body from the rocking. A bright streak split the sky. Isola flinched, breath snapping in her throat. Look at me. His voice was steady, level, untouched by panic. She turned toward him, not because she meant to obey, but because his voice was the only thing in the coach that wasn't shaking. Wyatt reached out, slow and deliberate, taking her wrist. His eyes asked permission before he did the next thing. A courtesy rare in places like this. He guided her trembling hand to his chest, over the dark coat. Breathe with me, he said. Slow, right here. Follow this. Her body was wound tight as a bowstring, but his chest was warm, his pulse even and grounded, like the steady rhythm of hooves on dry road, the kind of steadiness carried by a man long familiar with storms. She tried. A breath in, caught halfway. He murmured, slower. A breath out, broken. It's all right. Again. Each thunderclap seized her chest. Each gust made her shudder. But each time his hand at her wrist kept her breath from fleeing her body entirely. The coach jerked hard to the left. Isola tipped, instinctive, and her shoulder pressed into his. Her forehead brushed the edge of his collar. His breath warmed her hair. She froze. But Wyatt didn't move. He held his ground, as if the whole coach could split, and he still wouldn't. "Stay like this," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that softened something in her chest. "Just breathe." She closed her eyes. No wind, no storm, only the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The coach rocked a few more times, then slowed. The driver yelled something, horses exhaling hard under the crash of rain. Then a shout. "Station's here! Move!" Wyatt's hand tightened around her wrist for a brief second before releasing her. Isola opened her eyes, her lips trembling from fear, and something else she had no name for yet. Rain hammered the shelter roof outside, loud as drums. The door swung open, wind sweeping in. They would have to run inside and wait the storm out. But before stepping down, Isola glanced at Wyatt and found him already watching her with eyes that held no demand, no pressure, only understanding, so deep it nearly brought tears to her throat. The wooden door of the way station swung open, a cold draft sweeping in with the thick smell of rain. The small lodging room was lined with pine boards, the roof low, the oil lamps casting a dull yellow glow. Tables sat uneven, water from leaks staining the grain, and the air carried the mix of smoked meat and kitchen fire, the kind of place travelers used only because they had no choice. Isola paused at the threshold, her shoulders still shaking from the cold. Mud clung to her skirt, her hair dripped, and her breath held the ragged edge of the panic she had fought in the storm. The driver pointed at a few empty tables before heading toward the kitchen. Wyatt entered behind her, not touching her, but close enough that the wind curling through his coat softened before it reached her back. No words. Yet the small space between them made her pulse go faster than she wanted. They sat at a wobbly table in the corner. Isola placed her hand on the rough surface, feeling the cracks in the old wood. When the server brought out their plates, stew with vegetables and a thick slice of bread, she froze for a moment. She knew the price of a meal like that. She also knew she only had enough money to get home, not for a warm supper. She lowered her eyes, ready to refuse, but the server looked at Wyatt. "He's paid." Isola stilled. Wyatt didn't look at her. Not once. He only tore a piece of bread, as if the matter held no importance. She understood. He was giving her dignity. She was grateful, but the only repayment her pride allowed was pretending she didn't know. She lifted her spoon, her hands still cold. The hot food sent up steam, its smell stirring the hunger she had swallowed all day. She ate slowly, carefully, trying not to show how empty she truly was. Wyatt saw enough to understand everything, but stayed silent, as if he saw nothing at all. After a moment, he stood, fetched a cloth from the counter, dipped it in warm water, and wrung it out. Then he returned to the table. No words. He simply laid the cloth over her shoulders. A small gesture, yet it made her whole body go still. The warmth seeped in slowly, as if someone patient was coaxing her tense heart to ease. She didn't look at him. He didn't look at her. Just that closeness, too close for propriety, yet exactly right for what both of them needed. After a while they spoke, not about the storm, not about fear, but about things truer than that. Isola leaned back slightly, her voice quiet like a coal ember under the stove. "I've spent half my life living out of borrowed rooms. No home, no land, nowhere to rest. I keep moving because nothing ever asked me to stay." Wyatt turned the tin cup in his hand, listening without cutting in. He spoke only when she finished. Long roads can make a person think they were born to walk forever. I know that feeling. His eyes darkened a shade. I spent near 10 years on the trails. Slept wherever I landed. Woke with no one remembering I was out there. No one waiting at the end of any road. Her breath caught. Not from pity, but because for the first time, someone spoke a hollow that matched her own. You have no family? Wyatt shook his head. Just land and a horse. But they don't hold you when the nights get cold. A small laugh slipped from her, more breath than sound. Not joy, but a sudden thread of shared truth. They ate in silence. But it wasn't a hard silence. It felt like an old blanket. Thin, a little worn, but warm exactly where it mattered. Night settled. The station keeper cleared the tables, and everyone laid out makeshift bedding on the floor of the single common room. Each person claimed a corner. No one had the right to ask for more. Isola lay near the wall, her back turned outward. Wind slid through the door cracks, and rain tapped the wooden roof in a steady rhythm. She tried to sleep, but her mind clung to the sound of the storm. Old memories thudded in her chest, turning her from side to side. She opened her eyes. Wyatt sat at the window ledge, back to the wall, one leg drawn up, his hat resting on his knee. The lamp cast half his face in warm shadow, outlining the curve of his jaw, and an expression that wasn't watchful of the door. He was watching her, not staring, not prying, but as if keeping an eye on her breathing, making sure the fear didn't drag her under again. Isola turned away at once, her heart stumbling, but her mouth edged into a small, involuntary curve. A man sitting guard against the wind for her through the night. No promises, no claims, just presence. And for the first time in years, she did not feel alone. Night wind struck the wooden walls, each gust sounding like the mountain's long sigh. The rain had eased, but sudden tremors still made the way station groan. The travelers sleeping on the floor had slipped into heavy rest after the long day. Only Isola remained awake. She lay on her side, the thin blanket failing to warm her, eyes fixed on the dark as if it whispered a warning of what might come. A faint crack sounded, not loud, but sharp enough to send every old instinct in her rising, the instincts that had carried her through nights worse than this. She sat up fast. The wooden ceiling dipped slightly, just a little. But for someone who had watched a barn roof collapse in childhood, a little was enough to freeze the blood. She rose on shaky feet, breath quick, backing toward the wall. Her eyes widened, her hands trembled. Wyatt turned from the window ledge at once, as if he sensed her fear before she made a sound. Isola. His voice was low, slow, carried as if he spoke it first to the wind, then to her. Come here. She didn't move. The wood overhead creaked again. A small splinter fell, light as dust. Yet to her it was an alarm. She gasped, retreating another step. Wyatt stood, stepped toward her. He didn't touch her, but his presence alone shifted the room. He held out a hand, not forceful, not urging, simply offered, letting her choose. A hard crack snapped across the roof. Isola covered her ears, flinching. This time she reached for him. Wyatt closed his hand around hers, light but sure, and led her through the back hall, down a narrow damp passage to a small storage shed. The old door groaned open, the smell of dry wood and hay rising from inside. The space was small, dark, but sturdier than the main room. The walls held firm. The roof was thick. No voices here, only her heartbeat, and his, close enough to feel. Wyatt shut the door. He didn't let go of her hand. In the dim, he said quietly, "Nothing's coming down. I'm right here." Isola tried to breathe deep, but it caught in her throat. "It's not the roof," she whispered. "It's me. I hate being afraid like this." Wyatt stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his chest. "There's nothing wrong with fear," he said, "only with carrying it alone." Isola bit her lip, fighting the urge to retreat into herself as always, but the stillness around them made it impossible to keep her guard fully up. "Wyatt, I have been alone for so long." Her voice broke, soft but sharp. "I lost my husband too early. No children. No place to return to. I'm afraid of being left behind." Wyatt raised her hand, his thumb brushing the soft skin below her wrist, right where the pulse beat strongest. "I noticed you before we even boarded," he said slowly. "At the station. Everyone else was noise, but you made me stop." Her breath hitched. "You noticed me?" "Not out of pity." He moved closer, but in the kind of way where I couldn't look anywhere else. In the small shed, the smell of old wood mixed with his warm breath, creating a quiet closeness thick as dusk. Wyatt lifted a hand, paused long enough for her to refuse if she wished, then touched her cheek. His fingertips were slow, warm, tracing a path as if learning the shape of her fear. Isola closed her eyes and leaned into his palm. He lowered his forehead to hers. Their breaths met. No rush, no pressure, just two worn souls finding the first shelter they had known in years. She whispered, no louder than the wind outside, "You're not someone I should lean on." "Maybe not," Wyatt said. "But tonight, let me be the place you rest." Isola didn't answer. She only placed her hand on his chest, where his heartbeat thudded steady, strong, certain, calm. Wyatt wrapped his arms around her. Not tight, not hungry, only holding. And Isola, for the first time in months, let herself soften in someone's arms. They stayed like that for a long while. Rain falling in slow intervals, the creaking roof quieting. Inside the shed, their shared warmth eased the long distance between them. When fatigue pulled at her, she let her head rest on his shoulder. Wyatt pulled an old storage blanket around them, then sat on the floor with her half in his arms. He never lifted his hand from her back. She never lifted her cheek from his chest. In the dark, steady calm of the shed, they slept. Not because fear was gone, but because for the first time, neither had to fear alone. Isola woke to early light slipping through the cracks in the shed wall. A pale band swept across the wooden floor and touched her eyelids. She blinked several times, slow and heavy, as if her lashes were stuck together from a sleep too deep. There was the faint scent of old timber, and beneath her cheek, the warmth of a man. The moment she realized it, she jerked upright as though cold water had been poured down her spine. The blanket slid off her shoulders. Her breath caught in her throat. Wyatt still sat against a storage chest, one arm resting in the space she had just left. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady. The dawn lit the edge of his jaw, sharpening every line, peaceful in a way that unsettled her. She pulled back fast, straightening her coat, trying to hide the flush rising into her face. Wyatt opened his eyes. No surprise, no questions. He looked at her for a long moment, a look that made her pulse stumble. "Sleep all right?" His voice was low, roughened by sleep. Isola swallowed. I didn't mean—" She had no sensible words to explain falling asleep on the shoulder of a man she had known 2 days. Wyatt didn't smile, but something in his eyes had the soft look of cooled ash. "No need to explain. You were tired. So was I, that's all." Those simple words only made her more flustered. His calm, the ease with which he accepted the closeness, made it difficult to meet his eyes for a few breaths. She stood first, brushing dust from her skirt. Wyatt folded the blanket, careful, as though it weren't the way station's old cloth, but something that deserved respect. When they returned to the main room, most travelers were awake. The driver called for an early departure. "Storm's gone. If we ride now, we can reach Red Haven before sundown." Isola tightened her grip on her bag, avoiding the looks from those who had seen them step out from the back hall together. But Wyatt walked without a flicker of self-consciousness, as if there was nothing to hide. They boarded the coach. Wyatt took his old seat, across from her. But when the wheels rolled, his eyes drifted in her direction more than once. Not quick, not embarrassed, not secretive. Simply looking. Isola tried to keep her gaze on the window, but each time she glanced over, he was already watching, as if he expected it. The quiet between them no longer felt awkward. It was warm, very warm, and stretched tight like a cord pulled close to snapping with the slightest release. At the second stop, a young woman climbed aboard. Blonde hair, pale blue dress, the faint scent of perfume. She sat beside Wyatt, leaning in. "Traveling far, sir?" Her voice sweet, her smile wide. Isola turned away, pretending disinterest, but her heart thudded as though someone had pulled the chair from beneath her. Wyatt answered politely, a short reply. No more, no extra glance. But the woman leaned closer than needed, her hand brushing, his arm when the coach jolted. A small, sharp sting bloomed in Isola's chest, barely there but unmistakable. Jealousy. A feeling she had not tasted in years. The feeling of letting someone too near her heart. She fixed her eyes on the ridge of pines outside. But each time the wagon lurched, the woman's hand touched Wyatt's again, and Isola felt a breath tighten in her throat. When the coach stopped, Wyatt rose first. He turned toward Isola, offering his hand without thinking. A simple gesture. But in that moment, she knew he would not do it for anyone else. The woman in the blue dress noticed, her brow tightening. Wyatt didn't care. Isola should have withdrawn at once, but she let her hand rest in his, a heartbeat longer. By late afternoon, the coach rolled into a narrow valley. Ahead lay Red Haven, a small town tucked beneath the hillside, low-roofed wooden houses, thin smoke rising from a few chimneys. The sun sank slow, painting the streets in a muted bronze, quiet and wistful. The town was still. Shops closed early. A few oil lamps flickered in the soft wind. Wyatt looked out, then looked at her. "We're here." Isola tightened her grip on her bag and drew a long breath. Ahead waited her foster mother's fading breath, and behind her, a man who made her suddenly unsure she still wanted to walk the rest of the road alone. The Red Haven Infirmary was only a small wooden house refitted for care, its old tin roof sagging in the middle, its white walls yellowed with time. When Isola stepped through the door, the smell of boiled cloth and bitter medicine washed over her, dizzying, like memories rushing back all at once. Her footsteps sounded faint on the floor. A nurse pointed her to the last room down the hall. Isola slowed, her hands tightening around her bag strap, as if letting go might spill her heart onto the ground. Wyatt walked a few steps behind, close enough for her to feel his presence, far enough not to intrude. When they reached the final door, Isola stopped. Her breath thinned into a single, fragile line. "Go ahead," Wyatt murmured. "I'll wait here." A respect that needed no explanation, and yet it pressed against her ribs. Isola pushed the door open. Inside, an elderly woman with deep brown skin and silver hair damp with sweat rested against two thin pillows. Her cheeks had hollowed, her eyes half closed. But the moment Isola entered, they opened at once. "My girl." The voice trembled, but it was clear, and that sound shattered the last hard shell Isola had been holding. She knelt beside the bed and took the frail hand in both of hers. "Nina, I'm here." The woman's fingers shook, then steadied, tightening around hers. "I knew you'd come. Storm or distance, you always come." Isola bowed her head over that weathered hand, tears falling quietly onto the rough skin. No sobbing, just the tears she could no longer hold back. Nina stroked her hair the way she used to. "You've grown thinner, and you're still not sleeping enough, are you?" The truth of it brought a small, cracked laugh from Isola. Nina started to speak again, then glanced toward the cracked open door. One look was enough for Isola to know the question forming. The older woman lifted a brow, her voice thin but sharp with the same authority she'd had when corralling children years ago. "Who is that man?" Isola startled, glancing out. Wyatt stood leaning against the wall, hat in hand, eyes lowered, as if trying not to intrude on anything meant for the family. "He's just someone from the stagecoach," Isola said, her voice so small she wasn't sure Nina heard. The older woman let out a soft, knowing snort. "Just someone? Then why is he standing guard like a soldier?" She narrowed her eyes. "I may be old, but I'm not blind." Isola flushed. "We just helped each other a little on the road." "Helped each other?" Nina echoed with a faint, pointed hum. Isola opened her mouth to object, but the door creaked wider. Wyatt stepped in, holding a small bundle of pale purple and yellow wildflowers, likely picked sometime after they arrived. He stopped a few steps from the bed and bowed his head slightly. "Ma'am, thought I'd bring a bit of color into the room." Nina's eyes sharpened at once. "Well now, a handsome man who knows how to choose flowers. Hardly looks like a passerby." Wyatt blinked. One of the rare times Isola saw him caught off balance. He extended the flowers. "Hope you like them." "I surely do." Then she flicked her gaze toward Isola. "Look at this. A thoughtful man like that. Don't let him slip away." "Mother!" Isola's protest came out half-whispered, half-pleading. Wyatt cleared his throat softly. "I'll give you two some time. I'll be right outside. Not going anywhere." That line felt like someone had set a warm stone in Isola's chest, small, but heating everything around it. When he left, Nina took Isola's hand again. Her grip was weak, but warm as always. "My girl, you don't have to live like a ghost forever." The voice was rough, but sharp as the final stitch in an old cloth. "I know you're strong, but too much strength can turn into loneliness." Isola lowered her head. "I don't know how to love anymore. I don't know how to trust." "Then learn again," Nina whispered. "Like learning to sew. The first stitch will be crooked, but your hands will remember." Isola let out a soft, bitter laugh. "He's just a man passing by." "No." Nina shook her head, eyes wise and gentle. When a man waits at the door all night so he won't disturb you, that's not someone passing by. Isola had no words. Later in the afternoon, when Nina drifted back to sleep, Isola stepped into the hall. Wyatt stood at the far end, hands in his pockets, looking out at the small dirt yard outside the infirmary. She approached him. "I'll be staying a few days," she said. Wyatt turned, his gray eyes catching a glint of the fading sun. "I know. I'll stay too." Isola stiffened. "You? For what?" "Red Haven's big enough for a man like me. When you're done, I'll take you back." He said it as simply as noting the weather. But to Isola, the words fell heavy, with the weight of a promise she had not heard from anyone in a very long time. Early spring in Red Haven carried a strange kind of calm, pale sunlight slipping over wooden eaves, thin dust rising each time a wagon passed, and the morning church bell ringing, like the slow breath of a town long used to moving gently. Isola stepped into a place she had never imagined belonging to, the office of the Red Haven Ledger, a small wooden building with windows facing the main road, stacks of print paper piled to her shoulders, and the smell of ink clinging to anyone who entered. The editor, Elsie Marner, a sharp, thin woman with her hair tied high, handed her a sheet of paper. "You write, don't you? I read the note you left the nurse to reserve a room. Neat penmanship, clean sentences." That was how Marner hired people. No interview, no questions about background. She either trusted or she didn't. "Write a short report on last week's flood. 400 words. Whether we print it depends on how you do." Isola nodded, her heart beating harder than it ever had with a pen in her hand. She sat at the table, her fingers still showing the faint tremble of the past days caring for Nina. Sunlight angled through the window onto the blank page, and for the first time in years, Isola Gray found herself doing something no one expected from a black woman, with no home, no support, and no place to stand. She was writing about the very town she had stumbled into. The words came as quietly as breath. "The creek rose to our knees, but the people of Red Haven did not leave each other. They held hands through every foot of mud and walked as one. I believe some small towns know how to stand closer than cities ever will." When she set the pen down, a shadow crossed her table. Wyatt. He stood outside the open window, not stepping in, his habit. The brim of his hat cut the sunlight, his gray eyes steady on her. "You drink coffee, don't you?" He held out a steaming tin cup. Isola took it. "You don't have to keep bringing this every day." Wyatt leaned lightly against the window frame. "I know, but I want to." No long explanation, no excuse. And he didn't look away from her. Elsie Marner caught the sight from her window slit, narrowing her eyes, though the corner of her mouth curled, as if she knew too well the shape of a feeling growing right in front of her. That afternoon, Wyatt came again, but this time he brought no coffee. He simply stood close enough that the breeze through his leather coat brushed her hair. "Walk with me?" He asked it like commenting on the weather. Isola glanced at the piles of paper, then at those gray, storm-flecked eyes. She nodded. They walked along Red Haven Creek, where the water ran small but clear, reflecting the sky like a breathing mirror. The stones along the bank were round and slick from the recent storm. When Isola stepped onto a slanted rock, her foot slipped slightly. A large, warm hand cupped her back, not pushing, only steadying. "Careful," he said, voice low, light as a cord tightening around the steady beat of her heart. Isola's breath caught. Only they knew what lived in that moment. the curve of her waist under his palm, the heat running up her spine, and his breath close enough to warm the edge of her ear. When they walked on, his hand no longer touched her, but the warmth stayed. She said softly, "I'm used to walking alone." Wyatt answered without looking at her, "You don't have to stay used to it." They moved beneath the cottonwoods, each step a quiet tremor in Isola's chest, half fear, half wanting more. Toward evening, Isola returned to the infirmary to change the water in the vase. Nina slept deeply, her breathing steadier than the day Isola arrived. The peace of it made Isola's eyes burn, a mix of relief and dread of losing it. As she stepped into the hall, a voice called from the far end. "Miss Gray? Are you Isola Gray?" She turned. A middle-aged man in a white shirt stood there, holding a stack of papers. "I'm Bishop Alden, the town land steward. I have business regarding Miss Nina's estate." Isola stiffened. "Estate? What estate?" He approached and placed the papers in her hands. His voice was firm but sympathetic. "Her land is under dispute. Someone is trying to force you off it." Isola went still. Redhaven Creek murmured faintly outside, the same calm water she had found comforting just moments ago, now sounding as heavy as her own heart beginning to drop. Isola stood on the infirmary porch for a long time, evening wind blowing up from the southern slope with red dust and the last chill of the season. The stack of papers Bishop Alden had given her weighed in her hand, heavy enough to numb her wrist. She read them a third time. The same words, the same stamps, the same lines about Nina's land being contested by merchants aiming to claim the water rights in this valley. And among the faded names in the report, she saw one clearly. Wyatt Cole. Not a signature, not an accusation. Just arrived in Red Haven to review land transactions. But it was enough. Her hand dropped to her side. Her breath shattered like glass on stone. Behind her, heavy, familiar footsteps sounded. "Isola?" Wyatt stood there, wind pushing his hair slightly to one side, his gray eyes harder to read than usual. He saw at once the shift in her face, the tightness she couldn't hide. "You all right?" His voice was steady, but his expression had sharpened. Isola held the paper out to him, her arm stiff as a plank. "Explain." Wyatt took it. He read slowly. The longer he read, the tighter his jaw locked. He folded the paper and handed it back. "Yes, I came to Red Haven because of the land." Isola stepped back, as if someone had pushed her. Her face did not change, but her eyes darkened. "I guessed as much," she said quietly, sharp as a blade. "So it was all about the land my mother left." "No." Wyatt's answer came fast, heavy. "Don't lie to me now." She turned away, her shoulders turning to stone. "I'm not some naive girl who's never seen a man angle for advantage." Wyatt stepped forward, then stopped, as if not to cross the distance she had thrown between them. "Isola, I came because of the land. That's true." His honesty was plain. "But not to take it from you." She let out a cold laugh. "That sounds familiar. Every man tied to land deals says the same." Wyatt drew a slow breath, the steel in his eyes not threatening, just a man fighting to stay calm. "I came because I knew those merchants were using false paperwork to seize Nina's property. They've done it in towns I've traveled through. I came to stop them." "Stop them?" Isola turned fully, meeting his eyes. And when exactly were you planning to tell me? When I had already signed the land away. Wyatt's silence dropped heavy between them. I didn't want you thinking I approached you for gain. His voice was low, worn with truth. I waited, so you could see me as decent first, before land came between us. Isola gave a broken smile. That's the problem. You appeared exactly when I needed someone. You helped. You touched every weak place in me. Everything looks too perfect. Wyatt stepped half a pace closer. Isola, everything I've done with you is real. Even if the sky falls, that doesn't change. She shook her head, eyes red but dry. I can't tell anymore. I trusted wrong once already. Do you know what waited for me after my husband died? Every man who came to help wanted something. The house, the land, my labor, even my body. Her voice thinned to a breath. And I thought you were different. Wyatt closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the look in them cut deeper than anger. I am different. No, Wyatt. She backed up until her spine hit the infirmary wall. Right now, I can't believe that. No sound followed. Only the faint beat of wind against the wooden door behind her, matching the uneven thud of her own heart. Wyatt finally understood. Not anger, not disappointment, but the shutting of a door. The instinct of someone who had lost too much, trying to protect what little remained. He nodded, slowly. If you need time, you'll have it. A breath. But I'm not leaving. Isola turned her face away, offering no answer. Wyatt stepped back, wordless, and walked down the hall, his boots heavy enough to make the wooden floor creak under each step. Minutes later, Isola entered Nina's room again. The old woman's eyes were open, studying the pain still written across Isola's face. My girl, she whispered. Something happened. Isola forced a smile. It's nothing. Nina narrowed her eyes, voice thin but sharp as a heated needle. Don't lie to someone about to die. Isola bowed her head. I don't know if I should trust him. Nina gripped her hand, weak fingers but steady. Isola, she murmured, in this life remember one thing. She looked deep into Isola's eyes, as though seeing directly into her chest. You already know whether you trust him. You're just too scared to admit it. The words landed inside Isola like a mark, and she understood. Every locked door in the heart always has its key somewhere in the trembling hand that closed it. That evening, Redhaven lay under a kind of light. People rarely paused to notice. A slow gold, warm as an oil lamp running low, but refusing to go out. Dust drifted in the air, rising and settling as if time itself had halted for half a beat. Isola stood on the porch of the inn where Wyatt was staying. Her hands gripped the edge of her coat, not against the cold, but to steady the heart that would not stop trembling. She had spent the whole afternoon trying to decide what to say. But when she stood before the wooden door, every prepared word vanished like dust on the road. She knocked. Wyatt opened at once. No question why she came. No surprise. From the look in his eyes, he seemed to know this moment would come. Isola's eyes blurred the second she saw him, not from anger, but from exhaustion. Exhaustion from fighting herself for too long. She spoke first, her voice thin and rough as a frayed thread. I'm scared, Wyatt. He didn't interrupt. He didn't step in. He simply stood there with the patient stillness of a spring where water never stops moving, never raises its voice. I'm scared of being used, she said. Scared of opening my heart and being left again. Scared of trusting the wrong man one more time, when I'm not sure I could survive it. The wind lifted a strand of hair along her cheek. Wyatt stepped forward. One step, no more. I know, and I don't blame you. She drew a breath that wouldn't settle. I thought pushing you away would hurt less. Wyatt lowered his head a little, as if he listened with his whole chest. If you need me gone, he said slowly, I'll go. I'll always respect what you want. Isola shut her eyes. Her lashes glistened. But when she opened them, her voice broke in the softest way. But I don't want you to go. Wyatt lifted his gaze, gray eyes deep as creek water at dusk. He stepped half a pace closer, just enough that his warmth brushed the air between them. Isola, he said, and this time his voice held the longing he had kept hidden. I didn't come to take anything from you. I'm here because you make me want to stay. For the first time in years, I want to belong somewhere, and that place is with you. Isola's chest tightened. She cried, not loudly, not falling apart, just silent tears sliding down her face like late evening mist. Years of holding herself up, winters spent awake, nights terrified of being left behind. All of it spilled out without a sound. Wyatt didn't speak. He only lifted his arms, slow, careful, and pulled her into him. That embrace felt like a real roof, asking nothing of her storms, not demanding she stand strong, simply sheltering, bearing what she could not. Isola buried her face in his shoulder, fingers grasping the thick coat, breath shaking like someone who had finally climbed out of a deep hole. A long while later, Wyatt touched her back lightly. Come with me a moment. He led her to Red Haven Creek, the place where water ran over stones, where they had walked before, where his hand had touched her back for the first time. Evening wind moved through the cottonwoods, their leaves whispering like old voices of the land. Wyatt stood before her. He set his hat aside. He didn't kneel. He only stood, choosing truth over ceremony. Isola Gray, he said, his voice not loud yet steady enough for the wind to carry. If you'll allow it, I want to stay. Not for days, not for months, but to build this life with you, piece by piece. Isola looked at him, her dark eyes bright with tears, her cheeks wet, her hand trembling. Wyatt lifted his hand and took hers. No rush, no pressure, just believe that I'm here for you. And I'll stay as long as you want me to. The wind stirred, scattering yellow leaves at their feet. Isola's breath caught. Then she nodded. Not the nod of a girl in early love, but the nod of a woman who had survived loss, rebuilt herself, and finally chose to trust a hand reaching toward her. In that moment, the creek shone like fragments of broken mirror catching the last light. And for the first time in a long time, Isola felt her heart stop wandering. In the days after her nod beneath the cottonwoods, Red Haven slipped into a peaceful spring, the kind of calm that made it seem the land itself was holding its breath, while two people began a new life. And they did begin. Not with a grand wedding, not with church organ music, but with the smallest, most ordinary things. Wyatt built a wooden house on the edge of town, a place where they could see Red Haven Creek each morning. He chose each board, drove each nail by hand, and every afternoon, Isola carried out a cup of lemon water, setting it on the sill beside whatever he was working on. No words needed, just a brief glance between them, warm enough to chase off the spring chill. The house stood finished after 7 weeks. A low roof, a broad porch, double windows facing the cottonwoods. Inside, a small but tidy kitchen, an old table Wyatt sanded smooth, and in the corner, a writing desk, the place where Isola would write the stories that would change Red Haven. And she did. Isola continued working for the Red Haven Ledger. But now she wrote more than town news. She wrote about black women of the West, women hauling water, sewing clothes, running small diners, building churches, teaching letters in charity schools. Those quiet stories began to travel, and the name Isola Gray became a voice for the unseen. Town folks said, "She writes with her heart, and words written with the heart don't disappear." As for Wyatt, the man who once roamed mountain trails without roots, he finally settled. He worked wherever he was needed, mending fences, fixing porches, building stables. Wherever there was work, there was the steady figure of a man in a brown coat with calm gray eyes. Then one autumn morning, a baby's cry filled the little house. A girl, dark-skinned, soft-cheeked, eyes round and bright as two small stones. Wyatt held her, his hands trembling so hard Isola thought his heart might fall straight out of his chest. A few years later, a boy arrived. Curls soft as fleece, sturdy legs pounding the ground like small earthquakes. That small family became the warm center of Red Haven. People spoke of them as though retelling a quiet legend, the wanderer who once kept to himself and the widowed black woman who had weathered storms. Two people no one expected to find a gentle ending, yet they rewrote their own fate. Years passed. The old boards gave way to new ones. Isola's writing desk soaked in the seasons. Wyatt slowed a bit, threads of gray in his hair, though his eyes held the same calm as the day she met him. One late summer afternoon, a breeze moved through the porch. The children ran into the yard, asking for a story. They climbed into their mother's lap, arguing over the opening line. "Tell the story about the storm night at the way station. The night you got scared and Daddy held you. And you slept on Daddy's shoulder." Isola laughed, color rising in her cheeks, and Wyatt folded the map he had been studying, crossing his arms as he watched his family with a pride that still surprised him with its softness. They sat together on the porch steps as the sky faded. Red Haven Creek carried the last orange light of the day, and the cottonwoods whispered in the wind like an old blessing. Isola leaned into Wyatt's shoulder, no longer the cautious lean of someone afraid, but the steady lean of someone who had found where she belonged. She whispered soft enough that the wind had to bend to hear it. "If the storm hadn't come that night." She paused, her hand tightening around his. "I don't think my life would have ever found a place to rest." Wyatt turned his hand and clasped hers, placing a light kiss on the strands of silver beginning to show in her hair. "And I," he murmured, "would have never known I could stay in one place for a lifetime." They sat like that as the sun dipped completely, their children laughing in the yard, and the creek running calm as the final line of a story. Not grand, not showy, only warm and true as the last breath of the day. A love that began in a storm and became the legacy of the years that followed. If this story stirred a memory in you, a person, a moment, a small warmth from long ago, feel free to share it below. And if you wish to hear more quiet love stories like this, please like, subscribe, and follow the channel, so we may keep bringing you the gentle wonders of the Old West.